But speaking of the Second Doctor, we have multiple actors who have played the Second Doctor before, and this is this one for here, Beyond War Games, is Michael Troughton, but we also have Fraser Hines, who has been playing the Second Doctor for years on Big Finish, and is doing so once again in the Companion Chronicles, the Second Doctor Volume 3. Now, there have been multiple, of course, Second Doctor ones, which I have not listened to yet, Companion Chronicles Volume 2, Companion Chronicles Volume 1, not listened to any of these, I'm so sorry, but this one, I was really intrigued by the cast list, of course. Fraser Hines, Wendy Padbury is reprising their roles as Jamie and Zoe. Fraser is playing the Second Doctor. We got Rufus Hound, of course, as the meddling monk, who, if you listen to The Outlaws, you know that I'm all in favour of. Dude's really, really cool. And a Dalek as well, like a ghostly Dalek. And that's where our first story takes us. For those of you who don't know, the Companion Chronicles are typically stories that, as the title implies, are much more focused about the companions than the Doctor themselves. We have 4 stories here: The Death of the Daleks by George Mann, The Phantom Piper by Martin Day, The Prince of Denmark by Paul Morris, and The Deepest Tragedian by Penelope Faith. 4 stories, you can kind of segment these into 2. Death of the Daleks and The Phantom Piper are about the Second Doctor and Jamie. The Prince of Denmark are more or less about Zoe on her own, making friends with other people, with the Second Doctor hardly present at all. For the purposes of this, we're going to take this in order. TFL Creative Media says, do these stories relate to Season 6B? Not as far as I'm aware, no. In fact, you can actually place Death of the Daleks really, really easily, because this takes place directly from the events of the Evil of the Daleks, where the Second Doctor and Jamie and Victoria have just caused the final end of the Daleks on Skaro. I'm assuming this takes place after the first scene at the Tomb of the Cybermen. They walk into the TARDIS, Victoria goes to change her clothes and goes to relax, and then this story, The Death of the Daleks, takes place. It's taking place on the war-torn planet of Tursaman, where the Daleks have just tried to wipe out a human colony. In order to fight back, the human colony in question decided to basically scupper their entire plans of repopulating their species to bring an end to the Daleks. But there's a Dalek ghost on the battlefield, and ghost in the Doctor's mind, as he might be having regrets about wiping out the Daleks on Skaro just moments ago. Let's listen to a clip.
If that thing out there really is a Dalek, what's it mean? It means that everything that happened on Skaro was for nothing, Jamie. It wasn't for nothing. You stopped them. You put an end to their plans. Oh, Jamie, I always put an end to their plans, and they just make more. I mean, I thought this one time to put an end to it all, to stop them coming back for good. I dared to believe I was doing the right thing, and I chose to wipe out an entire race. But you'd do it again, Doctor, if you had to. And I'd help you. Be careful, Jamie. Everything has a price. Everything we do has consequences, Jamie. I mean, look at Anya. Still haunted by what she had to do to win her war. Aye. That I can understand. Oh, perhaps you were right. There wasn't a Dalek. After all, I really am just seeing ghosts. Now you're the one talking nonsense. Ah. There we are. Have you found something then? Well, it's hard to be sure, Jamie, but there might be something.
It's kind of mad how good Fraser Hines is as the Second Doctor at recapturing Patrick Troughton. Like, obviously he worked with Troughton, worked with him for several years, but he's really, really, really good here. I would just like close my eyes and listen to the set and think that this is like someone like Michael Troughton, or this is Patrick Troughton himself somehow exhumed and is now working for Big Finish. But no, it's a terrific impression, and I really like what this story's going for as well. It's really a really atmospheric story as well, taking place predominantly on this battlefield of a war-torn planet where the Daleks have tried to wipe out this colony, and they've had to do the ultimate sacrifice to fight them off. So it's these parallel storylines between the Doctor's guilt and also Anya, who's like the head of this colony, who's played really, really well by Emma Sams. She's like terrific in this story. It's really atmospheric, and I was a little bit worried as the story was going on that it would it would go into the neoliberal framework of, oh, should we actually stop fascism? Should we feel guilty about like wiping out the Daleks? Like this episode does make it clear, however, that while the moral cost is high, it doesn't make the personal toll of the final end against the Daleks any easier. That's what the story is focusing on. It probably is the best thing for the universe and for everything that the Second Doctor did what he did at the end of Evil of the Daleks, but that doesn't mean the actual trauma of doing it. That doesn't mean that the personal toll it takes on you as, like, you know, as a person just goes away instantly. And the Second Doctor is naturally full of a lot of regret. And Jamie is, like, really, really supportive, but doesn't quite see that perspective because he's not seen the things the Doctor's done. And the idea that there's now maybe this ghost Dalek on this battlefield hunting down the last few people, the last few survivors of this colony, is a really cool concept. And Nicholas Briggs' Dalek voice is really unique and quite different. It's really cool. It's a really good release. It's possibly the highlight of this story, this box set, The Death of the Daleks by George Mannett. It's either this or The Phantom Piper, because these are really good, like, Jamie character pieces. The Phantom Piper particularly, where it takes place on the colony world of Sora, where everybody, all the humans who arrive on this colony planet, get a chip in their brain which allows them to record their memories. And in doing so, we explore the past of Jamie a bit more, as possibly these chips are malfunctioning, maybe wiping or altering some people's memories. We'll talk about that more a little bit shortly. But these two stories, The Death of the Daleks and The Phantom Piper, focusing on Jamie, are the highlight of the box set for me, and the Second Doctor's relationship with Jamie. Both stories are framed on Jamie being interrogated and interviewed. I don't know if that was a coincidence or that's just how the exposition naturally worked in the writing process for these two stories. But Death of the Daleks, the framing device is that Jamie is being interviewed on a lie detector that will shock him if he tells any lies. And he has to confront the idea that maybe he doesn't trust the Doctor. Maybe he thinks that the Doctor is not in a very good or healthy headspace after what he's done on Skaro at the end of the Evil of the Daleks. And especially in Evil of the Daleks, where the Second Doctor was kind of manipulating Jamie, it's a really interesting way to take the characters and to take the story. It felt really, really organic. And that's probably the best way for these companion chronicles to work, where you can slot them in and give the audience a great frame of reference if they have watched Evil of the Daleks. I think this was meant to come out in 2020, but then it got postponed because of the Panini. But also, maybe it helped because Evil of the Daleks has come out on Blu-ray, it's been animated, so that frame of reference being so recent for many fans works out really well. I don't know if that was deliberate, but it worked out really well for me. But yeah, The Death of the Daleks, really good atmospheric story. Fraser Hines kills as the Second Doctor and as Jamie. But it's either this or The Phantom Piper, which is the best of the release, where the Doctor is watching through a monitor as Jamie is interviewed on this colony world by Dr. Hunter, who is played by Simone Labilbe, who, yeah, once again, terrific job. Just the whole ensemble cast of the story is great as well, this whole box set. And Jamie is going through his past, including the meeting of the Second Doctor in the Highlanders, going back to his childhood. And because of recent events, there's been a protest on the planet of Sora about these memory chips. A protester has been killed, and Jamie did not step in to help, even though there was nothing he could do, and it eats away at him. And this is a clip about that.
Ready? Is everything okay, Jamie?
Fog. Musket fire. He's in my arms. His face in pieces. Jimmy! Jimmy!
Jamie, can you hear me?
What's happened? I know there should be something there. I feel it, but I can't quite grasp it. I can't remember.
Try not to get upset. It must feel very strange, knowing that something's been altered in your mind.
Is that why I'm a Piper, Doctor? Because I'm a coward?
Jamie, where's all this come from?
Did I want to be safe while my brothers were being slaughtered on the battlefield? But when the protester was knocked down the other day, I did nothing to help. No, worse than that. I ran away. I ran. My parents, my grandparents. I can't believe they taught me to be a coward.
My dear Jamie, no wonder you're troubled. You've forgotten your own past, key moments in your life that would remind you that you've been brave, that you've never run away from anything. I don't know why you fled from the accident, but you aren't responsible for what happened.
It's a really unabashedly simplistic story in that, like, the setup of it is simplistic. It is basically just, let's go down Jamie's history and really analyze his self-doubts and really put him on a pedestal about, like, is he really as brave as he wants to be, and where does that bravery come from? What were the last experiences and what were the last words that he shared with his grandmother, which has really informed him as a person. As someone who has not seen The Highlanders, the introductory story with Jaime from season 4 of the classic series, I don't know if there's any particular references to that, but if you've watched stories like The Moonbase, you'll know that Jaime tends to defer to the Phantom Piper, which is the title of the story, in terms of all the supernatural stuff that might be happening in his childhood. But yeah, it's a really good story. I think it's like I said, it's unabashedly simplistic in its framing device, but for the Companion Chronicles, for this format, it really, really works, and Fraser Hines does a terrific job. If you want something that's a bit more time-hoppy, however, get yourself a box set that can do multiple things, and that's what this Companion Chronicles does. The Prince of Denmark by Paul Morris, where Zoe is basically dropped off at this big library in the future to sort of do some reading, to do some research, and who does she meet there but the meddling monk, played by Rufus Hound. And, of course, Zoe has never met the monk before. Rufus, as if he's the monk quickly clocks on to the fact that she is with the Doctor, and decides to hatch a plan to meddle with history, specifically the invention of the television and William Shakespeare. Let's play a clip.
I used to watch television as a child, but once they took me off to the elite program...
Oh, you poor thing.
The Carcass Adventure Hour was my favourite. I notice they have an episode of it here, but, well, perhaps that's not the best way to spend my time.
What's your name, my dear?
Zoe.
Mine is... well, I shall follow your friend's lead and simply use my title. You can call me the Monk.
Oh, pleased to meet you.
As it happens, Zoe, I too have a time machine.
Really?
I was actually planning on taking a little trip this afternoon through the history of the planet Earth, which makes me wonder...
Yes?
Perhaps you'd like to come with me?
Come with you?
Learn a few things firsthand. I mean, you could stay here and watch the Carcass show all afternoon, but wouldn't it be better to meet history face to face?
Face to face?
Look it in the eye and say, I am not afraid.
Well, I'm not afraid.
Then what's the problem? Think how impressed your doctor will be.
This time machine of yours, you can control it.
Oh, goodness me, yes. What sort of irresponsible idiot would fly around in a time machine they couldn't control?
Well then, I'd love to.
Such shade. I love that line. So if you're a fan of the Meddling Monk and Rufus Hound's interpretation of it, it's so fun. It's a really, really impressive performance. And the weird places the story goes as well. Like, they meet William Shakespeare, and they end up changing a few things, or the invention of the television, and whether or not the original production of Hamlet was actually televised or not. Really fun and interesting directions. Yeah, I also, when it comes to, like, Jaime as a companion, I do think that Jaime is able to be, like, really interesting a character, even on his own. I think Zoe, however, she becomes a more interesting character when she's in an environment where the supporting cast can bring that out of her. And I think that sort of, like, playful nature that she learns from the Second Doctor on her travels comes out here because she's got someone like the Monk to challenge her. If this was just Zoe on her own travelling across time, it might be a bit boring. That's no slight on Wendy Padbury. She does a really good job here, but I think because she's paired with the Monk, and she's also paired with somebody else in the next story, The Deepest Tragedian, it really brings out the best. I think this volume of the Companion Chronicles has really honed in on what makes characters like Jaime and Zoe interesting, and it's really leaned into those strengths. And even the Second Doctor as well, but I'll close with that shortly. Yeah, the Prince of Denmark. I think that when it comes to the Meddling Monk, though, the story takes a bit of a turn. At one point, Zoe is arguing with him about, changing history and meddling with time and stuff. And the Meddling Monk, and I'm not misquoting, it's a direct quote, calls the TARDIS team, as in Jaime, Zoe, and the Doctor, a group of social justice warriors in their virtue signalling machine, which was, as far as I'm aware, the absolute worst. Not only do I think in 10 years' time it's going to absolutely date the story, like I was almost expecting like the meddling monk to start talking about critical race theory or something, but I want to love the meddling monk and Rufus Hound's interpretation of the monk the same way how kids love like pantomime villains in that really fun, cheesy way, but I don't want to love him in the same way that reactionaries like love watching Piers Morgan and Kevin O'Sullivan. It's not really what I like the meddling monk for. It really took me out of the story, and then later on they tried to brand him as like an Alex Jones conspiracy type, and I think with that interpretation of the monk in this story, they maybe try to paint the Prince of Denmark and the story that it's trying to tell with a little too broad of a brush. I don't know, like, Alex Rooney says, I'm sorry, what? That's the most 2018 line I've ever heard. Yeah, it's weird. It's gonna really, really date the story. I want to love to hate the meddling monk, but lines like that just make me dislike him. Like, I don't know, like, it's really, really weird. But now, whenever Big Finish get around to the 13th Doctor, want to know what he thinks of the fam? I don't know. I personally did not like that direction. Didn't like it. But the story itself is fun, and the resolution to it and how Zoe gets around it and fixes history in the end, really, really clever. Especially the multi-rolling. There's only 3 voice actors in this story, and one of them is playing an announcer. That's Nigel Fairs. It is like a two-hander by Wendy Padbury and Rufus Hound multi-rolling, and Rufus Hound even plays himself at one point as a TV presenter. It was really fun, really cool, and really creative. And then we get to The Deepest Tragedium by Penelope Faith, where Zoe is dropped off by the TARDIS at this remote location, and she meets someone called Tom, or Tommy, played by Richard Unwin. Someone who seems to have lost their memory, but is a proper thespian. And through play, through acting, he starts to learn why he's here, where he's come from, and what his mission is revolving the Second Doctor. Now, I've got to be completely transparent and upfront. I have listened to the full story in the full box set, but literally 5 minutes before going live was when I finished listening to The Deepest Tragedium. So this is super fresh in my mind, and I've not properly had time to stew on it yet and really think about it. And also because so much of the story is about the twists and interpretation and speculation, there's not too much I'm going to say about it in regards to the story directions that it goes in, but you know what? I'll stop talking for a minute, we'll play a short clip.
Right. Thomas, I'm back with you.
Tommy! It's Tommy! I keep telling you! Not Thomas, that's for official use only.
But you're not back with me, are you?
You? Who are you? I have to find him!
Come on, Tommy, have some tea. Sit still and quiet, and when you're ready, we'll try and find out what happened to you.
Why are you helping me?
We'll be helping each other. Besides, you called out for help. I heard you. I came.
Theo has decided to join, but it's an interesting story. I really do like how, much like the Phantom Piper, it's much more of like a bottle story, and a lot of the more ambitious nature of the story, where we learn more about Tom's past and where he's come from, are done through like the soundscapes, and you can kind of imagine how it's almost like a theatre production. We were talking earlier on stream what great Big Finish stories or Doctor Who stories would make good plays. The Deepest Tragedium would make a really good play. You'd need a really great sound designer on it, someone who's able to fill the room with these sounds of war, and to make maybe it's a slightly more complex and bigger war. You know, maybe there's some lore building here about who Tommy could be, and I'll leave it there. There's a really interesting theory on the TARDIS wiki page that, personally, I really agree with, and I think it makes the story a lot more interesting, but it is kind of left up to interpretation. Like I said, 5 minutes before going live was when I finished The Deepest Tragedian, so I don't have too many thoughts on it overall. But once again, you put Zoe in an environment where she's able to bounce off of an interesting character, and the performance as well. I think outside of Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury, I think that Richard Unwin is giving the best performance in the box set. And yes, I do agree, lumping Rufus Hound in there as well. I think this is a terrific performance from Richard. Like stellar, like multi-rolling, multiple personalities, great theatrical presence. Richard's terrific in this box set. Superb. I hope he does way more Big Finish in the near future. Can't wait to hear him again if he does. With this box set, I probably should have opened with this. All of these stories are two-parters, around 30 minutes long each. You've got 4 hour-long stories, all of them in 2 parts. And like I said earlier, it's kind of in 2 parts. The first 2 are the Second Doctor and Jamie, and the last 2 are Zoe being companions to different people. And I think that it's really honed in on what makes these characters interesting and leans and plays into those strengths. This is a really good box set. Really, really strong release. It's another in a long line of Big Finish black and white Doctors and TARDIS teams, much like the Outlaws that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago, where Big Finish have kind of hit it out of the park here. These are some really, really solid stories, and I even like I said, when it comes to my favourite one, I think because I prefer Jamie as a character, Death of the Daleks and the Phantom Piper are my favourite, but don't sleep on the other ones as well. If you are not a fan of the Second Doctor and Jamie or Zoe, box set's not for you, but if you are, this is a must listen. This is a really good release, and I think my favourite, I'm going back and forth, Death of the Daleks or the Phantom Piper. I might lean on Death of the Daleks because I do love how it expands the Second Doctor and kind of like leans into the aftermath of the evil of the Daleks and just the guilt of carrying a genocide with you. There's an incredible line in the story where, I won't say who says it, they say, "I take my cell with me. It's just a case of whether or not we lock the door." Wonderful line, a wonderful encapsulation from writer George Mann on what carrying that guilt must feel like, how it's your own cage, it's your own prison. It's a case of whether or not we lock the door. Mwah. Wonderful. And this is a wonderful box set. This is a terrific release that I wholeheartedly recommend if you are a Second Doctor fan. I think this is a really, really, really good release that is probably deserves maybe a bit more credit than other people are giving it. Fraser Hines is great, Wendy Padbury is great, Rufus Hound is great. It's a great overall package, and these stories are structured so differently and they have something for everyone that I honestly think that even if you don't love all of them, there's going to be 1 or 2 here that you're really, really going to gravitate towards.